My friend Mayatri on Bookstagram asked me, what are my favorite books of all time? As any reader would know, this is a difficult question to answer because what defines our favorite books of all time? But this is how I define mine. 1. I have desires to read it all the time and it never truly leaves my mind. 2. I must have given it 5 stars or more. And 3. It has impacted my life in some shape or way. So let's get started with first, my middle grade book selection. I've selected The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane and The Tale of Despereaux by Kate DiCamillo. I read them when I was a teen, around 17 or 18 years old, and to say that it has not impacted me would be lying. So let's talk about what Edward Tulane is first. The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane follows a China doll bunny who gets lost at sea and goes on an adventure to learn the importance of the world around him. While the Tale of Despereaux follows the journey of a young mouse who wishes to become a knight for the human Princess P. Yeah, although two of them are vastly different in their stories, the themes of love and self-acceptance are really the main driving forces of these books. Both stories, as you can see, are insanely short, but they truly pack a punch and hit me right here in the heart. And after reading these books, I felt truly seen on the inside and felt that I can finally come to terms with the ever-changing world around me that sometimes always seems to be filled with the most horrible things and events and people, but that there is still some level of beauty that is still on earth. And that's all I have to say. And honestly, I think are perfect reads for every single age, though I feel like it's important to read these books at different points in life because it gives you different things each time you read it. Yeah. And now it's time to move on to my literary fiction books, which is also another genre that I truly adore other than fantasy. And it will be these two books. So let's talk about Amen first. So Amen is by Won Pyong-son and translated by Ju San Lee. So this book is highly raved on BookTube and BookTok for the last, let's just say, few years. I mean, I understand that truly the real main hype of why everyone decided to pick Amen up was because of a BTS member recommending this, but I have to say that this is truly an excellent book, irregardless of that BTS stamp of approval. So we follow young boy Yoon-jae, who is born with a interesting medical condition called alexithymia. I don't know how to say it. I'm just gonna put it on the screen. Alexithymia. And that means that he has the lack of ability to be able to feel emotions candidly. So example, if he sees someone smiling, he wouldn't associate that with happiness or whatever that person is feeling. So he finds it very hard to read the social cues of humans, and as a result, he becomes very isolated as a child and eventually a teenager. And his mom and his grandma are the only people who truly understand his condition and continue to support him in ways that serves him best. But soon a tragic incident/accident happens to him and he becomes very isolated in himself, which he was before, but even worse than before. And at the same time, because of his condition and as the person that he is, the new kid at school, who is sort of a gangster, starts bullying him for his condition. And for what did he bully Yoon-jae for? Honestly, not too sure because not that he truly knows what's wrong with Yoon-jae, so why? I don't know. But the reason why I find that this story is so beautiful is the way that it addresses our own insecurities. Even if I don't have the same condition as Yoon-jae, sometimes I find that I struggle to really understand others and to be able to portray myself accurately to others. And it shows us all the insecurities that we have in life. And it leads us to show how humanistic it is to have those emotions, to have those fears of not being able to be loved, to be understood. And these are the real qualities that we really see on page with our characters. Actually, the main one of the main characters is actually the bully Gon, and when you see his backstory and how the fate of Gon and Yunjae gets intertwined over time, it's kind of beautiful to see the kind of relationship between the two of them grow as we progress through the story. So he starts off as a bully, but then we see a lot of his insight, a lot of his own insecurities, and Yunjae's own insecurities despite not being able to truly feel. And I think what's so beautiful about reading this book is that we get to see lives presented to us in a wholly different lens. And it gives me such insight into someone else's life that is so unlike mine. And though it makes me truly sad, I totally appreciate seeing that point of view. And honestly, one of my most favorite things in this book is the friendship in here, and it's kind of top tier, and I love it with all my heart. Highly recommend. And the next book we're talking about is Please Look After Mom by Kyung Suk Shin and translated by Chi Yong Lee. So this book follows an elderly couple that arrives on the crowded station of Seoul to visit their children who live in Seoul. However, the wife, Sonyo, goes missing and literally no one can ever find her. This sounds like a mystery. The way I put it, it does sound like a mystery thriller, but it is not about that. This story follows the perspectives of the son, the daughter, and the husband as they recount about this woman's life and how she means to them as a wife and as a mother. This is super duper painful to read. I want to cry talking about it a little bit, and every time I read it, I know I will shed tears. I definitely will. And because it's a story about a mom primarily, not really about a wife, about this woman, I had to give my mom a gigantic, big, tight hug after this, which I did after I read this. And you know what? This book, it hit painfully right here in the chest. So I want to read you the summary for this book that is on Goodreads that really very well explains the crux of this book, which is this. This is a mystery of one mother that reveals itself to be the mystery of all our mothers, about her triumphs and disappointments and about who she is on her own terms, separate from who she is to her family. If you ever have a daughter, a son, a husband, or a mother, please look after mom is a revelation one will bring tears to your eyes. Really well explained, and it is a wrong marketing decision to put that in the summary of the book, because I think the story is slow because you're following recounts of, you know, the daughter, the son, and the husband as they talk about this woman. So it almost feels like a biography written by them. But also injected are their emotions and their guilt and their sadness of not being a better child or a better husband to this woman, Sonyo. Honestly, I felt like reading this was a reflection of my own feelings towards my mom, and I think will impact someone who is also a mom. So you know what, you won't regret picking this up. If you need a good cry, just pick this up. What are you waiting for? All right, getting a bit aggressive, I need to step back. And that's all for my literary picks. And the next category is fantasy, my favorite genre of all time. I'm only gonna be holding up the first books of each series that I'm gonna talk about because the heavy bang. Yeah, these are the fantasy series or standalone that really hit me forever. They will forever be in my all-time favorite without a doubt. Because they hit me, they impacted me, I've given them 5 stars, and I love them for life. So let's start out with everyone's fan favorite, Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. Yes, this book is about a mobster family doing their mobster duties, and they are all extremely hot. That's the summary. That's all I have. Alright, I'll give you more information. I'm just kidding, okay? So this story follows the Culls, which are our hotties, and they're one of the two crime syndicates that are present in their city of Kekon, which is in Janlun, Kekon. So their country, they live in Janlun. And so they're the only, one of the only two crime syndicate families that manage Janlun. And, well, they have the ability to use what you call jade, and they're able to, have supernatural abilities from being able to wear jade. When they wear jade, yeah. And so they have to be strong enough to use jade to gain all these supernatural abilities. If not, they will face like addiction and possibly die from using jade. So they're really powerful people. Clearly they are. And the problem is they've always been defending the shores of Kekon. They've always been a great mobster family. They've always been a good crime syndicate family that protects their people. But foreign forces are coming onto their shores with a new drug called SM1, and that gives everyone the ability to use jade. That's not good. That means anyone can use jade. That's good. That's not really not good. Political imbalance, I scream. But honestly, Asian Godfather, say less. Being serious, what I love so much about Jade City is about its insanely action-packed story with a interesting magic system, but not overwhelmingly so, because this is a urban fantasy technically, because it's set in a more recent time and we don't have mythical creatures and royalty, and truly following characters that honestly feel so real. Like, I think they are real, just that they're hidden in a part of the world where I can't see them, I can't meet them, but I know they're real. I sound delusional. But yes, they feel so realistic, and they're very easy to root for despite their grey morality. So, none of these characters are truly good or evil people, because clearly we are just seeing from the story from their side, easily said that their enemy is also good people in their own ways. They're just protecting what they love with what they can do, I think Fondali has such an ability to craft a story filled with characters that are just so real, and their human relationships between the characters itself makes the reader feel like they're there with them, experiencing their pains, experiencing their trauma and their happiness and everything, and you're right there on the page with them. You don't feel like you're a bystander necessarily watching. It's almost as if you can see it from one person's lens and the other person's lens in the scene itself. And her action scenes are great, but what makes her writing so great is her ability to show communication between characters that feels so impactful and so pivotal to the story's progression, that it almost feels like one of those major fight scenes. There's such intensity in the way the characters speak to each other, the way that they choose their words carefully when they are conducting meetings with each other, and it doesn't feel boring, even though reading about characters speaking to each other for maybe a few pages can seem so. I felt like it holds such emotional weight to you that you know the significance of it being in the story. And ultimately, the character growth and the progression of the story spans across a long period of time, and we can see our characters grow from page 1 to all the way to the last page of the last book. And you feel like you yourself has gone through that 10 or 20 over years with them, and you've aged internally, but you have not. You just read this over like the course of a few months, let's just say. Character growth and characterizations are actually the strongest suit of this series. And that's why I would truly recommend this book for people who really care about characters, people who are character driven rather than plot driven people. Because a family saga, this is exactly that. Yeah. And clearly, because I do not love myself enough and I love to hurt myself with books, my next favorite read is The Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wong. If anybody has read this book, you guys know that this book is painful. And why the hell do I make myself suffer from reading this painful book? No idea. I read it standalone in the span of 3 days, and by the end of it, I felt internally drained. I felt empty. I felt my soul has left me. and that I was having a fever and that I was falling sick, love sick for these characters, and I can't let go of them at all. So the Sword of Kaigen follows a young boy named Mamoru and his mom, Misaki, as they are the strongest family, the strongest warriors of the Kaiganese Empire, and they're protecting them from the great evil from the peninsula of their country. A peninsula just means that they're on an island surrounded by water, so any enemy attack from ships is literally their first contact point, you know. We soon realize that the Matsuda family, which is the family that Mamoru and Misaki are from, they're being lied to by the Empire, and there's so much more to the world and their empire than it seems, because Big Daddy Emperor has been lying to them and to their faces. Yeah. Why this book made me feel like I was dead on the inside and why it hit me so hard when I finished it was really because this story was so heavy and was so heavy in its themes, but yet so compelling to read. And though this book seems to be about a war that comes to their shores, you know, it is so much more than that. And truly, it is truly an examination of a powerful family and their own trauma and fears and doubts about themselves. And yes, we get a war, pretty much we do, but this story also primarily focuses on these characters being who they are as people and being the kind of and being the roles that they are meant to be in society and in their families, and the stresses of that and the expectations of being that is something very well addressed in this book. And I like how that war here is not glorified, that we show a selfish government trying to protect themselves using a peninsula of people to defend their shores, to know that they will be the scapegoats of a war. And it shows that war is not beautiful or pretty or glorious, and that truly, even though it's always said to be such an honor to fight for your country, that it never really truly feels that way, especially when you're being lied to in this book. Additionally, I felt like this book challenges what we think of the world and what we think we can trust about the world, and that we should always be questioning the world that's set around us, because what someone tells us is not always going to be what it truly is, and that other people's prejudice and warped opinions can form our own warped and prejudiced opinions as well, and that we should go beyond our boundaries to understand a world that we are in. This book is set in an East Asian inspired place, which is why you can see they're named after Japanese names, and so this East Asian setting has characters who have East Asian values that I can totally relate to, because these are the kind of values that I've been given growing up in the kind of society that I'm in, and with Asian parents that are Chinese. Yeah. And not to mention that this is an elemental magic system. Avatar Legend of Aang, this book took elemental magic that is very similar to Avatar The Legend of Aang and turned it into something quite unique and very fun to look at, because our characters use swords and they're like samurais, but they use water and transform water in ways that I find is so cool. It's so not atmosphere, it's so beautifully written that you could see the imagery of them swinging their swords around and how the water moves with it. And honestly, I find that if you're someone who's not the biggest fan of fantasy, or you're really intimidated by fantasy, picking up this book that is a standalone is the easiest way to enter a fantasy without having to be afraid of a 12-book series or even a trilogy of a 3-book series. So this one is a good place to start, because I find that more than about a intricate, confusing magic system, this is truly a story about a family. Pick this up. And talking about the last series for fantasy before I reached my final book is this bad boy, the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. If you haven't watched my latest vlog on finishing the last book, Assassin's Quest, you're missing out. Go watch it. Go watch it. I don't know where I'm gonna put it, but go watch it because I talk so much about this book at length without spoiling it. So if you're interested, you could go and watch it. But let's talk about what this series is about. So we are following a young boy named Fitz, who is a bastard child of the prince of his country. And you know, as a bastard child, difficult times for him because what is he? Is he royal or is he a commoner? He's nowhere. He's nowhere. He is neither here nor there. He's just in between. So the king makes him a secret assassin for the royal family, and that's the story, him training to be an assassin. Can I just talk about how he's not such a great assassin? Not really a spoiler because I think reading the first book already indicates how not great of assassin that Fitz is, but it is not truly about him being an assassin. You know, so when I finished the very last page of the very last book of this series, I was broken because clearly I don't love myself enough. I want to break myself with books, okay? This broke me in a way that's very different from Sword of Kaigen because it mainly follows a first-person point of view where we are seeing Fitz and his journey as a young boy all the way to a teenager, young adult. And so you see his growth and his pains as a person. And I am a hardcore stan of Fitz. I love him. He is my child. I must protect him. No one should hurt him anymore. Yeah, that's how I feel about Fitz. And it's just something so endearing and painful about reading his coming of age story in this series and how he has to endure all the pains and the responsibilities of being a bastard child to the prince. And I find that the themes of him actually being a bastard child was such an important narrative for this book because you really see how difficult it is for him to be neither royalty nor a commoner because he can never be truly a commoner, being able to choose anything out of his free will, and yet he's not royal enough to be able to stand up for himself as a royal. And so he's really caught between worlds, and you see how difficult it is for him to be someone who is born out of wedlock and especially related to royalty when he's neither here nor there. And we can see him struggle through all the pains of him growing up as a royal bastard in a really ruthless political world where people are out to get him because he is partially royal, which makes him have the ability to maybe be the next ruling, to be a crown prince eventually. And it's incredibly heartbreaking to see all the pain that Fitz goes through doing things for others and never doing anything for himself because he doesn't have the choice of ever choosing himself over others in this landscape. Some people really, really dislike the Farseer trilogy because of how much they dislike Fitz as a character. They find that he's really whiny, that he's always angsty and upset and feels like he can never do more for his situation. But I have to stand up for my boy Fitz because he's angsty, he's upset, but he's just a child and he's reacting appropriately, I think, to all the situations that are being forced onto him. I think if I was him, that I would probably react the same because I would feel helpless in my situation, and yet I don't want to do all the things that people are telling me to do, Yeah. And obviously from everything that I told you, it definitely is a story that is a little bit slower, slower paced, although it is intense in political intrigue and it is very exciting in that aspect, but there are moments in the books where there are bouts of time that just passes with nothing truly happening, especially in book 3. That was the worst, but also the most fulfilling in terms of everything and its ending and whatsoever. So if you're a character-based reader, once again, I recommend this. But if you're a plot journal reader, I don't think that this is something that you can't try. But you might struggle through book 3 because even as a character-based reader, I did struggle with that. So yeah. And so we reached the very final book that I want to talk about, and it is a book that I hold very closely to my heart, and it means so much to me. And I've not ranked any of these books, and these books are not presented by ranking but by categories. And none of these books are ranked at all, but I just want to mention that this book is at its very, very, very top place in my heart. I know nothing can ever, ever triumph over it. And that book is, whoa, A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. Is this a shocking book to review? I guess so, because I'm like such a fantasy-based reader that to pick a middle grade magical realism fantastical book is kinda not what I thought. Not what I think people would think I'll pick, but this is my favorite book of all eternity. I cannot stress that enough. But you know, every time I talk about this book, I know I will struggle with it because I find it so hard to portray, first of all, the story, what it's about, and also my feelings towards the book, because I feel so strongly about it that I literally cannot do anything to make myself feel less for this book, and I get a little bit emotional talking about it. And you know, when I first read this book, I knew in my heart that this would be forever a book that I love forever in my life. And so I'm so thankful for Patrick Ness for writing this, and Shabam Daud for ever coming up with the idea of A Monster Calls. And this is just a perfect book for me. And like I said, I'm a girl who likes to hurt herself by reading books that make her cry and feel bad inside. So this book is also a book that made me cry and will always make me cry with every single reread that I ever do for it, which I probably have reread this over 10 over times. Yeah, watched the movies maybe 2 to 3 times. So yeah, I'm great. I'm doing fine. I can assure you that I'm doing great because I've always picked books that make me cry. And honestly, is this an exaggeration of all my emotions? Clearly you can see that it's not, that I truly feel this way about this book wholeheartedly in my chest. But let's try to talk about what this book is about. So the story follows a boy named Connor, and you know what? He's struggling at home because his mom has cancer. He lacks shoulders to lean on because his mom is his sole caregiver and the only one that he has in his life. His dad has left him. You know, he remarried, he divorced his mom and he remarried and has a new family in America. And he doesn't really like his grandma, who is his mom's mom, because she's kind of straight-laced and like not the kind of grandma he expects and wants to have. He wants a grandma who is soft and sweet and bake cookies, but this grandma is a businesswoman. And she's very strict and she's very condescending to him in a lot of ways. And so he doesn't like that. And so we follow him through a story that it's very, very isolating for him because it's tough for Connor to deal with all the struggles of his mom being sick, him having to just live life as it is as a 12 or 13-year-old boy, pretty much taking care of himself, no one pampering him, and you know, being isolated from everyone in school because they're too afraid to approach him because he's the kid with the mom who has cancer. And one day a tree comes walking and tells him stories to get through his ordeals. And that is basically the premise, but it's such a short book that I feel like if I talk too in-depthly about it, that it will kind of spoil the experience. But with this book, it's not about truly knowing the plot of the book that would ruin the experience, but even, in fact, knowing it will give you a better insight as to what you're getting into. And when you read it, it's so much more about the delivery and the messages that are provided in the book that really hit home for me. I want to share a blog post that I wrote years ago, which I'll put up here, either one, where I spoke in-depthly about my emotions and my feelings towards this book and how much it has impacted me and why I feel so strongly about this. Which is why this part of the video is probably going to be like the really condensed version of that blog post. So if you want to know more truly about how I feel about this book, it's best to read the blog post. But I'll try my best to truly explain why I feel the way I feel. Technically, in every single way, I can't relate to Connor. First of all, when I read this book, I was close to his age, yes. But I've been so lucky to have parents who are always been healthy, that never went through a particular sickness at a young age, and they've always been there for me, and they've always been parents to me. Unlike Connor, who has technically been living a life so different from me, but yet at every single turn of the book, I feel more and more for him, and I relate to him more and more, because this boy is suffering from a grief of losing himself and possibly losing his mom. The book addresses grief in a fresh light, following the person that is not sick, but the one that suffers from watching the one they love fall ill and possibly eventually die. And that level of grief is special and unique in its own way. And the story progresses like a regular, realistic one, with bits of magical realism in it, with the tree coming to life and telling stories to Connor. And we see how Connor struggles to be wholly himself, even though people around him are forever defining him as the boy who has a mom who has cancer. And no one is truly looking at him, no one is truly looking at the person he's meant to be, but what these conditions that he cannot control define him to be. I find that this book requires several rereads to really, really feel the messages that Patrick Ness is trying to put across, and that it is always constantly on my mind, that I think is really truly the number one book that I'll recommend to everybody, and I have always recommended this book to everyone I know, even non-readers. And you know what? Like, I read this when I was a pretty young person, in terms of like being a 14 or 15-year-old child. Child is an exaggeration, I guess, as a teen. And I felt like this book helped me to shape how I view loss and grief as a young person who has lost family members close to me at a very young age as well. And I think it helped me shape my ideas of death, and maybe not see it in such a fearful light. And that is also why, I guess, I chose to join palliative medicine as a nurse previously, which I am no longer doing. And it definitely steered me into that direction. It truly did. And it really is the catalyst to my character growth and my story. Yeah. But I can't really talk too much about this book. It's hard to talk about it. See, I can really feel the tears coming on thinking about it, but I want to leave off this particular section with a quote from the book that I love so much, and I will try not to cry reading it. It's a really long passage, so I will read it slowly. Some context for this scene before I read it is that Connor is currently visiting his mom, who's in the hospital, and they're speaking to each other in the hospital. It starts off with Mom. "I think deep in your heart, you've always known," his mother said. "Haven't you?" Connor didn't answer her. "It's okay that you're angry, sweetheart," she said. "It really, really is." She gave a little laugh. "I'm pretty angry too, to tell you the truth. But I want you to know this, Connor. It's important that you listen to me. Are you listening?" She reached out for him again. After a second, he let her take his hand, but her grip was so weak, so weak. "You be as angry as you need to be," she said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Not your grandma, not your dad, no one. And if you need to break things, then by God you break them good and hard." He couldn't look at her. He just couldn't. "And if one day," she said, "really crying now, you look back and you feel bad for being so angry, if you feel bad for being so angry at me that you couldn't even speak to me, then you have to know, Connor. You have to know that it was okay. It was okay, that I know, okay? I know everything you need to tell me without you having to say it out loud, alright?" He still couldn't look at her. He couldn't raise his head. It felt so heavy. It was bent in two, like he was being torn right through the middle, but he nodded. He heard her sigh, a long, wheezy breath, and he could hear the relief in it, as well as exhaustion. "I'm sorry, son," she said. I'm gonna need more painkillers. He let go of her hand. She reached over and pressed the button on the machine the hospital had given her, which administered painkillers so strong she was never able to stay awake after she took them. When she finished, she took his hand again. I wish I had 100 years, she said, very quietly. 100 years I could give to you. He didn't answer her. A few seconds later, the medicine had sent her to sleep, but it didn't matter. They had had the talk. There was nothing more to say. And that's the end of the video. And on that note, these are all my favorite books of all time. And you know what? I hope that you enjoyed this video and that, and that you tell me what are some of your favorite books of all time. Because I'm interested. I want to read some of your favorite books of all time and see what's up with them and why they have impacted you so much. Tell me why they have impacted you so much. And you know what? Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Bye!